Hello, this is Bleep Bleep, Bloop Bloop.
We are back. This is episode 8 prequel, so it's footage that's from before what was included in episode 8 proper. And here you got two views of the same proto board PCB, and the one on the right has been flipped so that the pin locations will correspond to the labels on the left. Y is yellow, R is red, B is blue, and G is green. Okay. The green ones don't look green because I use green screen. Sorry, that's why. Okay, and this is the scheme for which solder I used and which flux. Okay, so the yellow, the yellow pins, and the ones to their right, directly to their right, I used old K100 LD. Okay, the red pins, I used the lead containing Loctite solder. That's always, lead solder is beautiful, always goes on super easily. And then for the blue and the green, I used the K100 LD, but with 3 different fluxes. So for the blue pins, the ones on the left, including the actual blue color ones, I used the CQ4LF flux, the liquid flux in a dropper, a syringe tip. But then to the ones to the right of the dividing line, I used the blue stuff, CQ2LF, I think. And then for the last group, I used the goopy stuff. Okay, so the beginning, I flashed pictures of two images. One is of John Updike, and then the other one was of the stars of the Granada Television Sherlock Holmes adaptations. Okay, and now I'll get to that why I showed that later. And now this is the PCB. I'm actually starting to solder now. This is just soldering practice. It's just to keep me keep me warmed up. So keep me used to soldering, because you can go a while without soldering, and then if I'm going to solder the piece of real PCB or a breakout board or something I really need, or just wires or something I need it to actually work, I want to loosen up first. I want to get a little bit of practice back in, So, all right. So this would be the top. So this would be the old K100 LD solder and no added flux. And it's going to be the solder job comes out not great. You can't see in this, but maybe you can see there's little you see like gouges or like tracks in the tinned tracks. Not good. Gouges, I guess, is better. Like you can see scratches. How's that? You can see scratches. You see scratches in the tin tracks on the proto board. That's because I used the 3M hand pad and I roughed up a little bit and cleaned with pure ethanol afterwards. I find that really makes a difference. If you have like PCBs or proto boards that have been sitting around forever, just simply cleaning it, even vigorously cleaning it with like a Kim wipe and ethanol, is not going to necessarily get you what you want. What I thought it should have done, what I didn't do, what I now think about doing, next solder practice, maybe I will do it, is I need to go over like a loop of sandpaper and spin it around on some of the header pins that I'm soldering in, because the solder may not be adhering super well to the header pins because they may be grimy or grungy. Just, if you're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? From what? Right? It's not rusty, right? It's not wet or anything. There's no mold growing on it. Have you ever cleaned you have an air purifier that has a HEPA filter in it? Think about it. And if you cleaned it, even if you don't have pets or anything, or it's in an office in your home where there are no animals and you keep the windows closed and so on and so forth, there's still a surprising amount of dust. So there's just stuff in the air, and it does accumulate. Try not to think about your lungs in that context. It's not a warm and fuzzy thing thing to think about. Of course, the human respiratory system, in the upper respiratory tract, we have cilia and thing, and they're supposed to flick out the particulates and stuff. But what about maybe, I don't know, explain, like oil vapor or something, like vaporized oils, things that are like volatiles, but they're not particulates. But they can form like a coating or a layer. Anyway, I'm not an OSHA person. I'm not going to get into it. But you get the idea. So why did I flash Updike's photo? So So Updike, John Updike, you can look him up. He passed away in 2009. I think they said he was working on. I think I read he was working on a novel, a fictionalization of something about the life of Saint Paul. Paul, he wasn't a disciple, but he glommed on. He jumped on the bandwagon shortly afterwards, after the crucifixion of our Lord Jesus. And so he was working on that. But a lot of his novels concern a man engaging in infidelity. It's like very strange. The only novel of Updike's that I've read is Towards the End of Time, which is I enjoyed it at the time. It made an impression on me. I still remember reading it. So I read enough, and I read widely. Although there's most of what's written, of course, I haven't read. My taste is not. My taste is kind of lowbrow. Okay, I'm not. Yeah, I've read Shakespeare. I've read the art of Shakespeare for the art editions of a number of plays. Not Romeo and Juliet. Like Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, and so on. And I enjoyed, the one about the guy on the Island of Prospero. Would you believe I understand the play very well? I just can't remember the title. So I've done deep dives, and I've read a lot of classical literature, but I haven't read most of it's beyond me. I haven't gotten into it. Maybe I'll get to it later. Who knows, if we have time. But anyway, Updike. So I've read Towards the End of Time, and to give you like a quick summary, it's about a guy who's living in a post-apocalyptic America where things are not as bad as you'd think. It's there was a Sino-American nuclear war that made the central government of the United States fall apart, but it seems like the states are keeping things together, and the narrator, the main character in the novel, is living semi-normally, actually. And there's like a black market economy. I think there's some minor shortages of some goods, but it's nothing terrible. And I remember the currency they're using. They call them welders after the governor. Yeah, a governor from that time, because the novel's from the 90s, so it's almost 30 years old now. I think it's 1997 it's published. I have a paperback edition of it. Maybe later I pick up a hardcover. I enjoyed it. There's also some supernatural or weird type stuff. I don't know. Should I get into it? Is it spoilers? There's things like maybe nanobots or micro robots, and they may be alien. They may be military stuff that's escaped into the wild. Something like that is in the forest behind the dude's house. I think he also the main character. I think he also has prostate cancer, but he's getting treatment and he's keeping it under control. Something like that. Anyway, so what I've gotten the book of Updike's. When he was still alive, he put together almost all of his short stories up until the year 1975. He covered almost everything. I think they said that 4 stories were left out. I don't know. I think I remember reading they said 4 stories left out. I heard that. I've read a little bit. I've read a few stories, but they don't stick in my mind. Nothing made a huge impression. But recently I picked up a book of his. It's essays. It's like prose. It's not fiction. It's not poetry. I'm not a fan of Updike's poetry. I don't know. Do you like poetry? I like poetry, but only certain poetry. I've read some poems on here before for you. Uh, I like Edgar Allan Poe's poetry. I like Houseman, some of his Houseman's poetry, for example. I like, what's the name of that guy? Ogden Nash. So it's quite a bit different from Edgar Allan Poe. But I like Ogden Nash. I like E.E. Cummings. Things like that. So either it has to be clever gag type poetry, or it has to be kind of old fashioned. I like Kipling, some Kipling's poetry, old fashioned stuff. I don't like most poetry. I think most people writing poetry would really be better off just writing prose or fiction, right? What I mean is write short stories or write essays. Just don't write. Most people shouldn't be writing poetry because that's not any good to me, from my point of view. All right. So recently, though, I got Due Considerations, Essays and Criticism by John Updike. So this was published, I think, about 15 years ago, and I got it just blind. I just bought it on an impulse because it was cheap, used, and hardcover, and I'm pleasantly surprised. I had no idea. I knew it was nonfiction. That's all I knew. But so I'm looking now to give you a flavor. Someone else will do a better job explaining it than I would. I'm looking at a review in The Guardian, theguardian.com, the UK leftist news site from, it evolved from a newspaper. And I'm looking at a review written by someone named Nicholas Lazard. Nicholas spelled as you would imagine it should be spelled. Lazard, Lezard. And it was published on Saturday, 8th of November, 2008. So, and there's a little yellow banner, warning banner on the top of the page, or near the top, saying, "This article is more than 17 years old." So it's titled, Due Considerations, Essays and Criticism by John Updike, The Critic Beyond Criticism. I'm going to read a little bit of the paragraph because it's good. The definitive review of Updike's criticism is Martin Amos's, reprinted in The War Against Cliché. In it, he paid due tribute to Updike's industry. The volume is cuboid and omniscience. John Updike even knows what's going on in a novel by Iris Murdoch. Iris Murdoch is an Irish author. I'm not familiar with her work, but it looks interesting from what I've seen. I have some on deck to get later, but I have so much ahead of me. I have so much reading to backlog. I should read that for other stuff first before I buy more stuff. This volume is no less cuboid than its predecessors, and it has to be said that it will produce different reactions in the general reader from those it produces in the reviewer. The former, meaning the reader, will revel in the book's virtual inexhaustibility. The reviewer will gulp and cancel all social engagements for the next week. Updike himself is winningly apologetic about the length of Due Considerations. I had hoped that, thanks to the dwindling powers of old age, the bulk would be significantly smaller than that of the two previous assemblages. Close quote. No, 7 years has produced 700 pages of nonfiction, including index, and 5 novels, and a collection of short stories. To say, quote, his industry shames us, unquote, seems somehow inadequate. So that's just basically, they've spent a paragraph telling you that it's a thick book. I'm holding it in my hands. I'm looking at it. It's not a thin book, but it's not an especially thick book. It's not super duper thick. If you're an old person, you remember TV guides. It's maybe 2.5 TV guides thick. It's larger than a TV guide, though, of course, okay? But, so, I've been browsing through it. That's would they get a book like this? I like books like this. I like books that are collections of essays and reviews of other books and things like that. I like that. I like them in general. They're kind of restful, relaxing. You can read them and you don't have to worry. You don't have to go crazy, thinking about, this is boring. I don't want to finish this. I don't know why, but it feels, it's less of there's less guilt involved in just giving up on an essay or a review, and saying, it's not for me, when it's short, when it's just a few pages and going to the next one. The same thing goes for short stories, but a lot of short stories tend to be on the long side. So if it's a 30 or 40, it's more like a novella than a short story. I'm not Updike. I mean, I'm speaking in general terms here. Then you feel like you've, sunk cost fallacy. You've got to finish it, or you feel like a quitter if you quit a longer story than if you quit a short story. Okay, so this is not the first book of essays or book reviews or something, or film reviews that I've read. Like, for example, years and years ago, one of the first ones that I read for pleasure that was nonfiction, like short form essays and things like that, it was Nick Hornby's book, Stuff I've Been Reading. So Nick Hornby, Nick spelled like, Nick, Hornby, Hornby. Supposedly the guy's a novelist. He's a British novelist. I wouldn't know. I've never read any of his fiction, to the best of my knowledge. I don't, unless I read it and forgotten. I don't think I have. But I really like that book. It caught my eye in a physical bookstore back in the days when I would often go to physical bookstores, because the cover had, I don't know, I can't remember the correct word for it. It had cutouts. They had used a punch and die to cut out the letters of the title and the letters of the author's name, and you could see inside. I think you could see some of the text, but I think it was a design. The punching was real. I remember the punching is real, but it wasn't like the title page behind the cover or a blank page. In normal books, you open the front cover of the book, the next page is a blank usually, or if they're cheap, it's a title page or something. It wasn't that. There's text visible through all the letters. Anyway, but I remember I read that every night before I went to bed. Helped me wind down. Although, I don't know about you. Do you read before you go to bed? Tell me in a comment. Give me your input here. Do you read before you go to sleep? Or do you subscribe to the belief that is unwise because it trains your mind to associate reading with becoming drowsy, and that it will negatively affect your ability to read? So I've been on both sides of that. I've been a don't read before going to bed guy, and I've been a, it works, it helps. Maybe it's the subject matter, right? Things like that. So in this book of Updike's, I think he's published, what did he say it is? Okay, so in the part of the review, I just read the first paragraph of the review from The Guardian from 2008. They say that, they quote Updike saying that 2 previous assemblages, so this would be the 3rd book of his essays and reviews and criticism of other people's work. I don't have the other 2 yet. I've got, after I got this and was pleasantly surprised, I looked around and saw what else, what are the other volumes, which of them were also available in hardcover for not much money. And I've picked one of those. I saw one seemed like a good deal, so I snatched it up. It's on its way to me now, but I don't have it yet. So in this book, I've only read a couple things, actually. One thing I've read is, okay, the first thing that I read, it caught my eye. I thought, wait a minute, is that what I think it is? There's a whole section in this book of introductions that Updike had written for other people's work. Okay, and the one that caught my eye was his introduction to the Everyman's Library edition of the Mabinogion. So Mabinogion, or I think Welsh people would say Mabinogion. I'm closer to that. Sorry, I don't speak Welsh or Gaelic or anything. But so it's the 1948 edition by Gwyn Jones, Gwyn, Jones normal, and Thomas Jones. And so it's 1948 edition, but I guess they were doing a new printing. They're bringing out a new version of it, but they weren't changing the translation. And they got Updike to write the introduction. So that was interesting because I had never read the Mabinogion, and reading his introduction got me to actually look up. I found on archive.org they have a browsable, scanned-in version of the 1948 edition, and you can borrow. It's one of the ones you can. A lot of times newer books are only available to people with vision problems. I don't know how you demonstrate to them that you have vision problems, and then you get special ability to borrow those books. I don't know. But the one I'm speaking about, the old edition of the Mabinogion by the Jones people, so they're both male names. Gwyn is a man. man's name. So it's two men, two brothers, or a father, son, don't know, cousins or something. Couldn't say. But that one you can browse and read. So things he mentioned, there was one, Branwen, daughter of Llŷr. So the Mabinogion is a collection of stories, like tales. They're like legends. Once in a while in the Mabinogion, they mention like a real historical figure. I think they mentioned like a specific Roman emperor or like a Roman governor, proconsul or something, who was a real person. Other times they mention it's all made up or semi-made up. The Mabinogion, I only heard of it years and years ago because there are some tales in there about King Arthur, but he's more like a Celtic warlord, tribal chieftain type, my understanding, than he is like the sword in the stone type version of King Arthur, you know. But so the story that I'm talking about now, Updike mentions first, is Branwen, daughter of Llŷr. It's a very interesting story. There are some things about it, like for example, it's you should read it. You should read it. You would get a kick out of it. I think if you're listening to this, you would get a kick out of. I gotta look at the. I gotta look at the page again because I can't remember the title exactly. Branwen, daughter of Llŷr. Okay, you should read it. They meant, for example, there is like a king of Britain, but actually it's just a king of some region of Wales. It would have been. It may be all mythological. It may be all legend. It may be not based on any. I mean, there may be no factual basis for any of this. But it's basically there's a king in England, and then the king of Ireland, but probably again a king of a region of Ireland, or like a regional chieftain type person. The regional chieftain type person comes over on boats to see the regional chieftain person in Wales that is in the story, and he wants to marry his daughter. And they want to have an alliance. It's a good deal. So the man in Britain, the Welsh gentleman, king, whatever, leader, chieftain, he agrees. But one of the other members of the family, male members of the family, is not so thrilled, and he gets up to some shenanigans. He mutilates the horses of the Irish side. Although they came on boats, they brought horses on the boat. I guess they did. They must have. They wouldn't get free horses because later part of the restitution is the Welsh leader gives them all free horses and their pickup horses and baby horses and all that kind of stuff. So I guess they must have brought their horses with them. So the other family member, the troublesome family member who he pops up again in this story. He's a recurring character. He does something to the Irish side's horses, and that makes them angry, and they're leaving in like a huff. I think they're still taking the Branwen with them. I think they're still taking her, but they're leaving in a huff. And the Welsh leader tries to make things right, and he offers to replace the horses, and he offers, I think, a silver staff I think he specifies the diameter in like the same diameter as your pinky finger, something along those lines, and some other gifts. And it's like, okay, I'm listening kind of situation. That it wasn't sufficient, but it was enough to get the Irish people to pause and not just get back on their boats and leave. And he sweetens it. The Welsh guy sweetens the deal by giving them a special cauldron. It's a special cauldron that you put in someone who's died, and they are. I don't know if you have to add water. I don't know if you have to heat it up. I don't know what you have to. It's like I don't know what you have to do. Is it just putting them in the cauldron, a dry, empty cauldron? Is that sufficient? I don't know. But you put them in this cauldron, like a big cooking pot, and they come out as good as new, as strong as ever, and everything's fine. Except they're very specific. They cannot speak. Whoever's been revived, whoever's been resuscitated, whoever has been restored to life through the use of the cauldron is not able to speak. It doesn't. The funny thing is that detail, it doesn't come up again in the story. As far as to the best of my memory, it never pops up again. The cauldron is used. Spoiler alert: the cauldron is used. Okay, but they don't. But it doesn't come up that they're not able to talk. It doesn't seem to have any bearing or any. Anyway, so that's the kind of thing where I remember reading books about ancient astronaut type stuff when I was a little child, and I don't know if the authors of the books would say this, or if it was my like intuition coming in, that including these weird extraneous details in stories that were likely like orally passed along orally just by people singing them or speaking them for generations, and then before they were written down, that kind of thing somehow indicated there was something real there underneath, because there'd be no other reason to keep transmitting like non-essential details. All right, but who knows? I'm not saying the cauldron existed, okay? But it's interesting. All right, they give their cauldron. The cauldron's cool, and there's this, and then the Irish king goes and he asks the Welsh king how he came to possess this cauldron. And basically, if I may be getting some details off. Okay, you got to read the story yourself. I encourage you to read it. But the Welsh king explains that it was brought to that region by this couple. They were like giants. They're very big people. They brought it and they gave it to him. He got it from them, at any rate. And those giants are somewhere else in his country. And then the Irish king is like, well, okay, now I'll give you the beginning part of the story. And he tells them basically how they had become a pain in his butt in Ireland, and that he'd wanted to get rid of them. But they were very strong, and it's not easy to overcome them by force of arms, right? So he tricked them into going into like some kind of a building that had been specially built for them to banquet and to have like a lot of food and a lot of drinky poos and a lot of yummies, num-nums. But then, unbeknownst to them, I guess hidden beneath the wood or thatch or whatever of the building, it was like an iron. They say it's like, I think they said an iron house. That's what they called it. So it was like, you can imagine like basically a metal cage. And then they set it ablaze. They set it on fire, and all of the everything had burned up. All of the material burned up except for the cage. And that this couple had abandoned their child or children. They had one or more children. They left them to die in the hot metal cage. But they burst out, and I guess they'd taken the cauldron with them. And somehow they'd gone from Ireland to Wales. It's just interesting, crazy detail. The whole story is really interesting. And I'm just giving you a tiny taste. There's a lot to it. Even though it's a short story, there's a lot to it, because the way they tell it, old timey mythical stuff, they just go jump, like one crazy thing. They just tell you something, this crazy thing happened, and just go to the next crazy thing that happened. There's no justifying or trying to maintain plausibility. They're just telling you, like, one of the guys is so big, he bridges a river just by like extending his body over the river. Like, I guess, like on all fours or on his back or something. And people walk across his back or walk across his stomach to cross the river. It's stuff like that. It's interesting stuff. But, so, first I read that, and then I got me into reading the Mabinogion. Or Mabinogion. Anyway. And then, that was page 100 and something in the book. And then next thing I went back and I read his review of a book by, what's the name of that guy? He is a Palestinian Christian genius. I'm flipping. You hear me flipping. Okay, Edward W. Said. When I was a youngster, I would have said. I remember when I was younger reading books, and they mentioned this gentleman as some kind of like a modern, like at that time he would have been like a bon vivant or some kind of a polymath genius. A very smart writer guy, but he's passed away he's passed away in the 90s, I think, also, or early 2000s. But he'd written a book, and it was published after he passed away, if I remember right, and it was called On Late Style, Music and Literature Against the Grain. Okay, so it seems like published 2006 by Edward W. Said, S-A-I-D. Is how you spell that. I may still be mispronouncing it. It may not be Said. I may be a fool. I'm a fool anyway. But I mean, I may be being foolish. It may be that my pronunciation is still incorrect. All right. Anyway, and that one, because it's so new, again, it's only people with print disabilities can read it on Internet Archive. But you can search it. The search will turn up results, and you may not be able to click on loading on the results in the search bar may not load the page for you because you can't take it out, right? but you can get the context. You can read the text on either side of the result of the search term, something like that. So basically, the Edward W. Said, in his book, I haven't read it. I've read this review of it by Updike, and it's worth the review because Updike is so erudite and well read himself that his thoughts on this book are great in and of themselves. You should read it. But so he basically says that Said doesn't really talk much about writers. He talks about certain writers, and I'm looking now. It's page 51 in the Updike book. He says the Sicilian aristocrat Giuseppe Tomasi de Lampedusa, the French criminal Jean Genet, the Greek Alexandrian poet Constantine Cavafy. I'm probably sure that right. But he doesn't talk about any other more widely known or more important authors. So that Updike, he'll do that for us. That's what he does in the review here. But the weird thing is that Said's book seems to be largely it leans on ideas of Theodor Adorno. So Adorno. He's a famous critical theorist and one of those people, the dialectic type people. He's an actual member of the Frankfurt School. So, and he was a Marxist. So, he's not what I would put him more in the, what do you call that? The Legion of Doom than in the Justice League. You know what I'm saying? If you get my drift? If you're dividing people, I would put like Marcuse and Adorno and those people in the Legion of Doom side. They may be interesting, and they definitely are interesting. Adorno is an interesting guy. But in my opinion, for what it's worth, which is nothing, a lot of Adorno's stuff, like most philosophy, is just nonsense. Most philosophizing is just babbling. It's like word games. Academic, highbrow, the super illustrious, the eminent philosophers of history, most of it really, no joke, is about the same level of realness and usefulness as when somebody's like, television, television, or like television programming, you get it? Or when they try to show you how to fold a dollar bill to show you some kind of Masonic secret or something. It's just pointless. It's no use. Things like Stoicism can be useful personally, or things like Taoism can be useful personally. I think I mentioned on a previous episode of this vlog, or this podcast. I'm not sure. Is it a vlog or a podcast? Whatever it is, podcast vlog maybe, or a vlog of a podcast. I mentioned before reading like the children's book. I think Zen Shorts by someone named Mirtha, and specifically one story. I can't remember I can't remember the title used in the book or the generic title for it. But basically, it's the farmer, and he's got a son, and a wild horse comes, and there various things happen with the wild horse and his son, and people say, "Oh, that's good. Wow, you're so lucky," or "That's terrible. Oh, you're so misfortunate." And each time the farmer is like, "Well, I don't know. We'll see," because that's the way life actually is. So that story is useful. I'm not going to become like a Taoist scholar or read a lot of Buddhist lore or anything. That's nice. I've got that. I put that in my back pocket. That's a good story to have on your mind in there when things happen, and you're jumping to assign a value to it, something positive or negative, its impact on your life overall. When you actually, realistically, sometimes it's obvious, and there's no way something terrible is going to turn out to be have a silver lining or something. Sometimes, or vice versa. Sometimes something is unqualified. There's no way to deny its goodness and its positive impact on your life. Okay, but usually in real life, it's not. In real life, everything is kind of gray in terms of how will this overall affect you. It can go either way. So that's a good story. And I mentioned Stoicism. Stoicism can be good. It can be good. But remember what happened. Remember Marcus Aurelius' son, the one who became emperor next? Yes. So I'm not saying that Marcus Aurelius was at home tutoring that gentleman. I can't remember the name. Not Commodus, I don't think. But his son, one of his sons, became emperor and was a very bad dude, okay? So you have to take what you can use from it. It's not like you're studying the theory of electromagnetism, or you're studying Newtonian physics, where actually you need to calculate trajectories of cannonballs because you're a artillery officer in the 1800s. It's not like that. Okay? It's just, it may be helpful as in a form of a consolation, or something to buoy your spirits up, to keep you going, okay? Or to help you absorb impacts that are negative, something bad, a tragedy in your life. It may help you to process it, okay? But it's not useful in the way that some other types of knowledge are useful, all right? So anyway, so I was talking about Adorno. So the Adorno stuff, because I was curious, I did do a little bit of reading about Adorno. I'm not a big Adorno guy. I'm not one of the people who reads about the Frankfurt School so I can understand the enemies and who we're fighting against or whatever. I'm not involved in the fight like that. And I don't usually want to do research about things like that. But it was interesting. Okay, so it's like a Wikipedia rabbit hole. So one of the people Adorno was like in communication with to try to get, get some kind of a position, like a paying job or some kind of a sinecure or something, was a gentleman named Walter Benjamin. So you can look him up. He died in 1940. His nationality was originally German, and if you read about him, he's an interesting fellow. And he wrote an essay. They say, Wikipedia says one of his best-known works is The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction in 1935. That is interesting. You can read that. And if you go to the Wikipedia bit for that, they say that that work was similar to or influenced by, where is it? There's another essay by another gentleman. It was an essay called, in French is something different, it translated in English, was The Conquest of Ubiquity. And the author of that essay was Paul Valéry. Paul, P-A-U-L, Valéry, V-A-L-E-R-Y, and there's a little accent symbol over the E, like a little apostrophe over the E, okay? And it's interesting, he wrote that in 1928. And you think about 1920s, I think they had just gotten talking films relatively recently. Before that, it hadn't been long they had had talkies. They had music recordings in the form of phonograph records, and I think they probably already had things like jukeboxes, if not jukeboxes as we would have known them. And they had a radio, right? Radio broadcast. So for him, in that essay, talks a lot about the way that the ability to have music, and whatever music you want, if you have it on a record, you can play it immediately and wherever you are and things like that. It's super interesting. You should read it. It's a very short essay. I found someone had uploaded a copy of it to their personal website, so you can look for it. It's The Conquest of Ubiquity by Paul Valéry. And remember, it was written in 1928, and this has been translated in English, and some ideas or something may have been lost in the translation, okay? But it's really worth reading. Okay, this is good. I am reminded here of a fairy play that, as a child, I saw in a foreign theater. Or perhaps I only fancy I saw it. In the sorcerer's palace, the furniture spoke and sang, took a poetic and mischievous part in the action. A door opening set off the piping or solemn tones of a village band. If anyone sat down on a poof, I think it's like a pillow, it would sigh politely. At a touch, everything breathed forth a melody. I sincerely hope we are not moving towards such excesses in the magic of sound. Even now, one can no longer eat or drink at a cafe without being disturbed by a concert. but it will be wonderfully pleasant to be able to transform at will an empty hour, an interminable evening, an endless Sunday into an enchantment, an expression of tenderness, a flight of the spirit. Days can be gloomy. There are men and women who are very much alone, and many whom age or infirmity confines to their company, with which they are only too familiar. I mean, people forced by sickness or age and weakness to just be alone, basically shut-ins. These men and women, reduced to boredom and gloom, can now fill their sad and useless hours with beauty or passion. So that's one paragraph from the relatively short essay, and he's talking about the good and the bad from having easy access to music. The good is mentioned at the end. The good is people who are basically solitary and isolated. They now can listen to music, and even back then they had spoken records. They had comedy records. They had storytelling records, things like that. They could use that, but they also, of course, they could have also been able to read a book, or they could have been writing letters or something. They could have been writing books or something like that. So the music is not the main thing. What I mean is, it's not as though they had no way to occupy the time, and now they have a big stack of phonograph records and a phonograph, right? And he also talks about the annoying aspect. You're at a cafe and somebody's playing music loudly, and it's like you're in the middle of a concert. Oh, I better stop here for now. Thanks a lot for listening. I'll pick up probably not where I left off, somewhere else soon. Good luck. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please sign up, and thank you for your support. Thank you for watching. Take care until next time. Bleep, bleep, bloop, bloop.